everyone. Before we start the video, subscribe to the channel and leave your like.
15 years of working in retail did not prepare me for that Black Friday. My name is Sarah Johnson, and on that morning in November 2023, when I walked through the employee doors of the Riverside Mall in Chicago at 4:30 in the morning, something told me that this day would be different. The air was thick with a mix of anticipation and anxiety that I already knew well, but there was something else, a different energy that made my stomach turn. Mike Turner, my co-worker of 12 years, was already in the employee hallway when I arrived, adjusting his badge with that signature smile that always made me question how anyone could be so optimistic at 4 in the morning. "Sarah, you won't believe how long the line is out there," he said, running a hand through his grey hair. "It's around the block, twice." I swallowed hard as I put on my red supervisor's vest. Memories of past Black Fridays started to play through. My mind like a slow-motion movie. The pushing the arguments that time in 2019 when we had to call security because 2 customers started fighting over a television. But something told me that today would be even more intense. "Mike, you will be responsible for the electronics section," I instructed, consulting the clipboard with the team distribution. "We only have 3 units of that new console on sale, and from the buzz on social media, half of Chicago wants one." Mike nodded, but I could see a shadow of worry cross his normally carefree face. At 5:45 a.m. I gathered our team for the final briefing. Young, inexperienced faces mingled with the veterans, all sharing that same expression of nervous determination. "Remember, people," I emphasized. "Remain calm, follow safety protocols, and most of all, communicate. Any situation that appears to be getting out of control, radio in immediately." The first sign that this day would be a nightmare came at 6:15 a.m. when our regional manager called to say that the central air conditioning system was having problems. "Don't worry, Sarah," he said in that irritatingly calm voice. "Maintenance is already underway." But I knew that with the temperature expected to rise to 75 degrees, a mall without air conditioning in the middle of Black Friday would be like a pressure cooker about to explode. At 6 a.m. sharp, the doors opened. The mass of people that entered reminded me of a tsunami, unstoppable, frightening, and completely chaotic. In a matter of minutes, the ground floor was occupied. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of raised voices, shopping carts, and the constant sound of cash registers. It was around 8:30 a.m. that the first major crisis of the day exploded. My radio crackled with Mike's strained voice. "Sarah, we need backup in the electronics section, now." I ran there, dodging customers and crowded carts to find a scene that looked like something out of a low-budget action movie. 5 men were arguing heatedly in front of the shelf of the console on sale. Mike was between them, trying to mediate the situation with his characteristic calm, but I could see he was losing control. One of the men, a middle-aged man in a Bears jersey, brandished a crumpled flyer in the air. "I got there first. I've been in line since 3 in the morning." As I tried to calm things down in the electronics section, my radio came to life. "Supervisor needed at teller 12, urgent." The voice was Jenny, one of our newest operators. Torn between the 2 emergencies, I made a quick choice. I trusted Mike to resolve the console situation and ran to the cashier. There I found a lady elegantly dressed, but with her face red with anger, waving a wad of yellowed coupons. "These coupons are perfectly valid," she shouted, while Jenny, pale and visibly nervous, tried to explain that they had expired 4 years ago. "Ma'am," I began, using my most professional and calm tone. "May I help you?" "Finally, someone with authority," she exclaimed. "Your employees refuse to accept my coupons. I've been a customer at this store for decades, and I've never been treated with such disrespect. I'm going to call head office right now." The air conditioning hadn't been fixed yet, and I could feel beads of sweat running down my back. The line behind the lady grew, and the other customers began to show their impatience with audible sighs and muttered comments. It was at that moment that I realized that that day would be a test not only of my professional experience, but also of my humanity. 15 years in retail taught me a lot about people, how to deal with conflict, and how to stay calm in pressure situations. But nothing had prepared me for the perfect storm that was forming that Black Friday. The heat was increasing. Tempers were rising, and it was only 9 a.m. I looked at Mike, who had finally managed to establish some order in the electronics section, at Jenny, who was still shaking slightly as she served the next customer, and at the coupon lady who was now typing furiously on her cell phone, probably composing an epic rant for social media. I took a deep breath, adjusted my badge, and prepared myself for what promised to be the most challenging day of my career. The real battle was just beginning, and I knew I would need every ounce of experience, patience, and creativity to get through the next 12 hours. The radio crackled again. "Sarah, we have a situation in the appliance section." Another fire to put out, another challenge to face. As I drove there, I couldn't help but think that at the end of the day, it wasn't just products we were selling. We were managing emotions, expectations, and sometimes even dreams. Black Friday was just beginning, and I could already feel it would be a story to tell for years to come, if we survived it. As I headed to the appliance section, I could feel sweat dripping down my forehead. The store's digital thermometer read 78 degrees, and it wasn't even 10 a.m. The situation with the coupon lady had been temporarily resolved with a current discount card and a mental note to update our coupon policy, but I knew that was just the tip of the iceberg. "Sarah," Mike's voice came over the radio again, "we managed to resolve the console situation, but now we have a new problem. One of the TVs on sale is defective, and the customer is—" He hesitated. "Well, let's just say he's not very happy." "I'm on my way," I replied, changing my route. On the way, I passed Jenny, who seemed to have regained some of her color. I gave him an encouraging smile, remembering my first Black Friday day 15 years ago. I was also shaking like a leaf in the wind at that time. Arriving at the electronics section, I found Mike trying to calm down a man who was gesturing furiously at a 65-inch television. "Straight out of the box," he shouted. "Not even 5 minutes on and you already have these spots on the screen. This is false advertising." The man was right. The TV had visible dark spots. Mike had already offered an exchange, but apparently it was the last unit of that specific model. The client demanded a superior model for the same promotional price, something that was beyond our responsibility. "Sir," I began using my most professional voice, "I completely understand your frustration. May I check to see if we have the same model in any of our other stores in the area? And waste another 2 hours of my day, no way." He took out his cell phone. "I'm going to post this right now on social media. Let's see what your superiors think when this goes viral." Just then, my radio crackled again. "Sarah, we have a situation in the warehouse. The industrial fans we brought in to compensate for the air conditioning, well, they've overloaded the circuit. Half the outlets in the store aren't working." I felt a pang of panic. Without power in half the outlets, we wouldn't be able to demonstrate electronics or use some of the cash registers. The heat was getting worse, and now we had an infrastructure crisis on our hands. "Mike," I whispered, "can you handle the TV situation? I need to check out this problem in the warehouse." He nodded, that determined gleam in his eyes telling me I could trust him. I rushed to the warehouse where I found our maintenance team trying to reroute power from the fans to different circuits. "Are the air conditioning technicians here?" I asked hopefully. "Not yet," replied Carl, our head of maintenance. "Apparently, every HVAC company in town is overwhelmed with emergency calls today." The heat in the warehouse was suffocating. Employees passed by carrying boxes, their faces red and sweaty. The pressure of the day was starting to take its toll on everyone, and I could see in the team's eyes that they needed some guidance, some sign that everything was going to be okay. I quickly gathered the supervisors from each section. "Okay, everyone, new plan of action. We will establish breathing zones around the store. Areas with portable fans where customers can cool down. Hand out free ice water. If any customer appears unwell due to the heat, call our first aid team immediately." I had barely finished giving instructions when I heard screams coming from the shoe area. A client had fainted, probably due to the heat. I ran there already, calling our medical team on the radio. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The intense heat, the anxious crowd, the technical problems, everything combined to create an increasingly tense environment. I saw Mike approaching, his face showing concern. "I managed to resolve the TV issue," he said, "but we have another problem emerging. Customers are starting to notice that some promotional products cannot be demonstrated because of a lack of power. It is generating widespread dissatisfaction." I looked at my watch, 11:30. Not even half the day had passed, and we were already facing a cascade of crises. That's when I had an idea. Mike, gather all the supervisors you can find. Let's implement Emergency Protocol B. Protocol B was something we had developed after a particularly chaotic incident in 2020, but had never needed to use it. It involved a complete reorganization of the store, prioritizing areas with energy, and creating alternative routes for the flow of customers. As we reorganized the store, I noticed that some younger employees were using the situation in creative ways. Amanda, a 22-year-old saleswoman, had turned the need to demonstrate unpowered products into something of a show, using her natural charisma to entertain customers while explaining the item's features. The heat remained relentless, but something had changed in the store's atmosphere. The way the team came together to face challenges, the creativity that emerged from difficulties. It was witnessing the best of people in one of the worst possible situations. At 12:15, I received news that made me smile. For the first time that day, the air conditioning technicians had finally arrived. But my relief was short-lived. They estimated at least 3 hours to solve the problem. "Sarah," Mike's voice came over the radio again. "You need to see this. The customers in the electronics section, they've started an organized line of their own. They're even helping each other with product information." I walked there to see for myself. It was true. Amidst the chaos, a small oasis of civility had formed. Maybe it was the heat forcing everyone to slow down, or maybe it was just the human spirit showing its best face when faced with adversity. But there was no time to philosophize. A new call on the radio alerted me to another challenge. Emerging in the toy section, Black Friday was far from over, and each new problem seemed bigger than the last. I adjusted my badge once again, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and prepared for the next battle. Because in retail, especially on days like these, every calm moment is just the prelude to the next storm. The clock said 12:45 when I realized I hadn't eaten anything since arriving at the store. My stomach was growling, but there was no time to think about lunch. The Black Friday chaos continued in full swing, and now we faced a new challenge: air conditioning. Technicians discovered that the problem was more complex than they initially imagined. "Sarah, you need to see this," said Carl, our head of maintenance, as he guided me into the engine room. The thermometer already read 82°F, and the air was so thick it felt like we could cut it with a knife. "The main system is completely burned out. They're going to need to bring in parts from a distributor in Milwaukee." I felt my heart sink. "How long?" "Best case scenario. 5 hours. 5 hours. 5 more hours of sweltering heat, angry customers, and exhausted employees." I ran my hand over my sweaty face, trying to collect my thoughts, when my radio crackled again. "Sarah." It was Mike's voice, sounding more strained than ever. "We have a situation in the food court. Some people are feeling sick because of the heat, and there's a lady and she's having a panic attack." I ran to the food court, dodging carts and customers. The scenario I encountered was disturbing. A middle-aged woman was sitting in a chair, hyperventilating, while a small group of people crowded around her. Mike was by her side, trying to calm her down. "I called the paramedics," he informed me in a low voice. But with the Black Friday traffic, I approached the lady kneeling beside her. "My name is Sarah," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" She nodded, still panting. "Let's breathe together, okay? Slowly, that's right." As I helped the lady calm down, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that some customers had started filming the scene with their cell phones. The last thing we needed was a viral video showing chaos in our store. "Mike," I whispered, "can you fix this?" He understood immediately, moving to discreetly block the view of onlookers with their smartphones. The next few minutes were tense. The lady, who introduced herself as Martha, began to regain control of her breathing. She had come from Indiana to take advantage of the promotions, she explained, but the heat and crowds left her overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," she murmured, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to buy my grandchildren a Christmas present." That moment humanized all the madness of the day. Behind every angry customer, every discussion about promotions, there was a personal story, a reason, a dream. Paramedics arrived 15 minutes later, but Martha was calmer and refused to be taken to hospital. I took advantage of their presence to make a quick inquiry about the store's conditions. "With this heat and this amount of people, you need to be careful," warned one of the paramedics. "We suggest that you reduce the store's maximum capacity until the air conditioning comes back on." It was exactly what I didn't want to hear. Reducing capacity would mean forming huge queues outside, which would generate even more dissatisfaction. But the safety of customers and employees had to come first. I quickly assembled our supervisory team. "Okay guys, new plan," I announced. "We will implement a controlled entry system for every person who leaves. A new person will be able to enter. We need to keep the number of people at a safe level." "But what about sales targets?" asked one of the younger supervisors. "Goals aren't worth anyone's health," I replied firmly. "Furthermore, well-served customers in a safe environment are more likely to make purchases than people feeling sick in the heat." Implementing the new system was not easy. Some customers waiting outside were furious at the sudden change. One particularly angry man began shouting that he had rights as a consumer and that he would sue the store. That's when I saw something extraordinary happen. Martha, the lady who had had the panic attack, got up from her chair and walked to the store entrance. With surprising calm, he began to explain his own experience of minutes ago to the angry customers. "You don't want to go through what I went through," she said. "They're doing this to protect all of us." His personal testimony had an impact that no official announcement could have. Most customers began to calm down and form an orderly line. At 2:30 p.m., I received some exciting news. Air conditioning parts were on their way to Milwaukee. But we still had some difficult hours ahead. Mike appeared next to me offering a bottle of water. "You need to hydrate," he said in his usual worried way. "I haven't seen you stop for a minute since you arrived." I gratefully accepted the water, realizing for the first time how exhausted I was. "How is the situation in electronics?" "Surprisingly well," he replied. "That organized queue that the customers themselves created, it's become a kind of technology discussion club. There are people there exchanging tips about products, helping each other choose the best model. It was incredible how even in the most adverse circumstances, people could show the best of themselves. Of course, we still had our challenges. The heat remained relentless. Some customers were still unhappy with the entry restrictions, and we had just discovered that one of the ATMs had stopped working due to overheating. But something had changed in the store environment. The initial chaos had transformed into a kind of collective solidarity. I saw customers offering each other water, employees taking turns resting in cooler areas, and even some children who turned, waiting in line, into an impromptu game. I looked at my watch. There were still several hours until the store closed. The day was far from over, and I knew that new challenges would arise. But for the first time since that crazy Black Friday started, I felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The radio crackled once again. "Sarah, we have a situation in the toy department." I took a deep breath, adjusted my badge, and prepared myself for another battle. After all, that was life in retail, especially on days like today. 1,500 hours. The thermometer now read 84 degrees, and I just received news that air conditioning parts were stuck in traffic between Milwaukee and Chicago. To make matters worse, an unseasonal summer storm was approaching the city, and the sky was quickly darkening outside the Riverside Mall. "Sarah," Mike called to me over the radio, his voice strained. "We have a serious parking problem. People in line are starting to panic because of the approaching storm." I ran to the main entrance, where dozens of customers waiting to enter were beginning to stir. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and gusts of hot wind swept across the parking lot. The combination of the suffocating heat inside the store and the weather threat outside created an apocalyptic atmosphere. "We need a contingency plan," I said to Mike, who had just arrived at my side. "If this storm is as bad as it looks, we can't leave all these people outside." At that moment, Martha, the lady who had had the panic attack earlier, approached us. "I can help," she offered. "I spent the last hour talking to the people in line. Many of them are from out of town like me." An idea began to form in my mind. "Mike, how many people do we have in furniture right now?" "Practically empty," he replied. "With the heat, no one is very interested in sofas and cabinets today." "Great. Let's turn that area into an air-conditioned waiting space, I decided. We can use the industrial fans that still work and create a password system to control the flow of people. As we reorganized the space, the first drops of rain began to fall. The wind was increasing and the thunder was closer. Carl, our head of maintenance, showed up with troubling news. "The emergency generator is ready," he reported, "but if we lose main power, we will only be able to keep essential lights and some critical equipment running." As if responding to this warning, a flash of lightning streaked across the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. The store's lights flickered ominously. "Everyone in position!" I shouted over the radio. "Emergency! Protocol C." Protocol C was our last line of defense, developed after a blackout during Christmas 2021. Every employee knew exactly what to do. Teams at checkouts began quickly finalizing purchases in progress. Security guards positioned themselves at strategic points, and our first responders were on alert. That's when the lights finally went out. For a few terrifying seconds, the store was in complete darkness before the generator kicked in. The sound system hissed and died, leaving only the nervous murmur of patrons and the sound of the rain that was now falling heavily. "Sarah." Jenny's voice sounded shaky over the radio. "The teller systems, they're not rebooting." My stomach sank. Without ATMs, we would not be able to process credit or debit cards, and on a Black Friday, practically no one carried enough money for their purchases. "Mike," I called, "get all supervisors in the office, now." The next few minutes were an exercise in creativity and problem-solving. We developed a manual sales recording system, something we hadn't done in years. Each purchase would be noted on special forms, with customer cards being printed on old carbon machines that fortunately we still kept in the warehouse. "It's like going back to the 90s, Mike commented, a nostalgic smile on his face as he unpacked the machines. The storm was still outside, but inside the store something extraordinary was beginning to happen. Older customers began to explain to younger customers how shopping was done in the old days. People shared stories of other Black Fridays, of memorable blackouts, of moments of crisis that turned into bonding experiences. Martha, who had become something of an informal goodwill ambassador, organized a system of mutual support among clients. People with small children received priority. Elderly people were accompanied by volunteers, and umbrella-sharing groups even emerged for those who needed to go to their cars. At 4:30 p.m., we received the first good news of the day. The air conditioning parts had finally arrived. The bad news: technicians estimated 2 more hours to complete the repair, and the storm made the work difficult. "Sarah," Mike called to me discreetly, "you need to see this." He took me to the toy department, where a surprising scene was unfolding. A group of children had turned the waiting area into a storytelling club, using cell phone flashlights to create shadows on the walls. Parents who hours before were arguing over offers now smiled and participated in the games. "It's amazing how people can adapt," I commented, feeling a wave of emotion hit me. The day had been a disaster in terms of sales, but it was turning into something much more valuable. The main power returned at 17:15, bringing with it a wave of spontaneous applause. The teller systems began to slowly restart, and the line of people with their manual forms began to move. "You know," Mike said, as we watched operations return to normal, "in 15 years of retail, I've never seen anything like it." "Neither do I," I replied, realizing that my shirt was completely soaked in sweat. "But I've also never seen so many people working together to solve problems." The storm was beginning to ease outside, but we still had a few hours to go before the store closed. The air conditioning was still not working, the systems were still unstable, and new challenges were sure to arise. But something had fundamentally changed that Black Friday. Amid chaos and crisis, we witnessed the best of human nature emerge. And as I adjusted my badge for the 1,000th time that day, I realized that this would be a story we would tell for a long time, not because of the problems we faced, but because of how we chose to face them together. The radio crackled again. "Sarah, you won't believe what's happening in the electronics industry." I exchanged a look with Mike and smiled. The night was still long, but now we knew we could face anything. 1,800 hours. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind humid, heavy air. The air conditioning was beginning to show signs of life, although it was still far from fully functioning. After everything we faced, the suffocating heat, the blackout, the systems down, it felt like we were finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But 15 years in retail have taught me that the last few hours of a difficult day can be the most challenging. Sarah. Mike approached his uniform as drenched in sweat as mine. We have a complicated situation brewing. Remember that lady? With the expired coupons from earlier in the day. My stomach flipped. How could I forget she's back, Mike continued. And he's brought reinforcements. There's a whole group of disgruntled customers at the main entrance, all with similar stories of rejected coupons and broken promises from years past. They're threatening to stage a protest on social media. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every minute of that endless day. My head was pounding, my feet were begging for rest, but I knew I needed to find a solution. I couldn't let that extraordinary day end in chaos. Where's Martha? I asked, an idea forming in my mind. Martha had become our informal savior throughout the day, turning potentially explosive situations into moments of mutual understanding. We also found her in the makeshift furniture department helping a family with young children to organize themselves. Martha, I called, I need your help one last time. As I explained the situation, I saw that familiar sparkle in his eyes, the same one that had transformed a chaotic line into a supportive community during the storm. Leave it to me, she said, adjusting her cardigan, but I'm going to need something in return. His plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Martha suggested turning that group of dissatisfied customers into an improvised advisory board for improvements to the store's service policy. In return, we offer special discounts valid for the next big promotion. You see, she told the group, I was frustrated today too. I even had a panic attack, but I discovered that when we work together, we achieve much more than when we fight. It was incredible to see how her honesty and vulnerability could disarm even the most angry customers. Within minutes, what started as a protest had turned into a productive feedback session. Meanwhile, Mike coordinated the final adjustments to the air conditioning system. The technicians say it will be 100% operational in an hour, he reported, although at that point in the day, it seemed more like a moral victory than a practical one. 1900 hours. The last official hour of our Black Friday was beginning. Business had slowed down considerably, but we still had determined customers browsing the aisles looking for deals. That's when Jenny, our young cashier who had grown so much, throughout that chaotic day came running towards me. Sarah, you need to see this, she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. People. They're posting about today on social media, but it's not what you think. I took his cell phone and started reading the posts. To my surprise, instead of the complaints, I feared I found stories of solidarity and overcoming, photos of the storytelling, group in the toy department during the blackout, heartfelt accounts of how strangers helped each other through the storm, videos of the Q community that formed under Martha's leadership. The hashtag Jark's Riverside Mall family is trending, Jenny explained, smiling. At that moment I felt something warm and wet run down my face, and this time it wasn't sweat. They were tears. Tears of exhaustion, yes, but also of gratitude and accomplishment. Mike appeared at my side, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. Hey, no crying, he joked, even though his own eyes were teary. We still have an hour to go. You know, I began wiping my eyes. When I walked in that door at 4:30 in the morning, I thought this was going to be the worst day of my career. And it wasn't, he asked, arching an eyebrow. It was the hardest without a doubt, but it was also the most meaningful. I paused, observing the movement in the store. Today we don't just sell products, Mike. We witness something bigger. 7:30 p.m. The air conditioning was finally working at full capacity, although the outside temperature was now cooler. The last customers began to head to the cashiers carrying their purchases, and more importantly, their stories of that extraordinary day. Martha came to say goodbye, hugging Mike and me tightly. You know, she said, I came here thinking about buying Christmas presents, but I ended up getting something much more valuable, a lesson in humanity. At 7:45 p.m., I gathered the entire team for one last briefing. Exhausted but smiling faces stared At me, each one bearing the marks of that intense day. Guys, I began, my voice cracking, I know today was, well, it was something we've never seen before. We faced heat storms, blackout systems, down just about everything that could go wrong did. But we also experienced something extraordinary. We saw the best in people emerge in the worst circumstances. Jenny raised her hand shyly. Sarah can. I show you something. She projected her cell phone onto the meeting room screen, displaying more Jarka Riverside Mall family posts. Look, people are organizing a Christmas get-together here at the store, 2,000 hours. The doors finally closed. The silence that descended on the store seemed almost surreal after so many hours of chaos and hustle and bustle. Mike and I did one last round checking each sector. 15 years, I murmured more to myself than to him. What's wrong? 15 years in retail, and it took the most chaotic day of my career to remind me why I chose this job in the first place. Mike smiled, that characteristic smile that now seemed to carry all the wisdom of that day. And why was it? Because at the end of the day, it's not the sales, the promotions, or the numbers that matter. It's the people, the stories, the moments, when we see the best of humanity shine through the chaos. As we walked toward the exit, I took one last look at the store. The empty aisles, the messy displays, the footprints on the floor, everything told the story of that extraordinary Black Friday. Hey, Sarah, Mike called already at the door. Same day, same time next year. I smiled, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. I wouldn't miss it for anything. And so ended our Black Friday 2023, not with a bang of record sales or sensational headlines, but with the quiet certainty that we had experienced something truly special, something that I'm sure will be remembered and told about for many years to come at family gatherings, friends get-togethers, and yes, at future Riverside Mall Black Fridays.